Welcome back, guys. So, without further ado, Konami reaches into your pocket every 3 months and steals money from you. And the worst part about it is you welcome it. You are the problem. You welcome it with open arms. In fact, the community clamors for this theft every lunar cycle. We call this cycle the Banlist. I believe Konami's ultimate goal with this next list, as it is with every other list since the game began and the first Banlist, is to sell new stuff. Shocking that money runs the world. And since we're getting Maze of Millennia in late January and Phantom Nightmare in early February, we can expect the list right around that time, maybe a little bit earlier, right? So maybe a mid-January list is a reasonable expectation. The game, as it happens to be, is in a pretty good spot right now, and we know what that means. That's right, that we're going to get a slaughter list. Now, the slaughter will not be as bad as my wish list and the wish lists of many other YouTubers on here, because Konami doesn't want to destroy their game, doesn't want to ban and limit, semi-limit a bunch of different cards, because that would be an admittance of the fact that the game is possibly broken in some capacity. So without further ado, let's just get into it. The best deck of the format that's been doing well across multiple YCSs, multiple regionals, just pretty much every tournament that you go to, you're going to see it, is Rescue Ace. A lot of people might think that maybe Unchained is the best deck of the format, maybe even Tearlaments. My personal thought is that Tearlaments is probably the best deck of the format. It's been the most consistent throughout. It hasn't seen drop-off in its performance, while Rescue Ace definitely saw a drop-off in YCS Richmond, and Unchained has seen drop-off in YCS Bologna and YCS Indianapolis. But still, currently throughout all the YCSs and regionals, it feels like Rescue Ace is probably the most well-represented decks. If you take out Richmond, it's especially the most represented. So we have to hit Rescue Ace first in some capacity, because if you hit anything else and you don't hit Rescue Ace, then we could be approaching a possible Tier 0 format. And so what is the best way that to hit Rescue Ace? We already discussed it in the wish list. I thought it would be Headquarters, because it takes away their grind game, because inherently what they do is really not unfair until they reset again for new sets on the next turn. But Konami doesn't work that way. Konami doesn't just banhammer cards that are that would simply just solve the problem. They usually do consistency hits, such as what we've seen with Dragon Link and others. And so I believe truly that Konami will probably limit Emergency. Possibly Airlifter, but I feel like Emergency is the best card out of their consistency cards. It helps them dodge effects, helps them dodge negates. It's a quick play spell, so it's inherently broken. And on top of that, it does so much for the deck. It's an E-Telly, you know. So it's very powerful because it helps you dodge with the Turbulence, with the Hydrant, with anything. It's a little too powerful for it to exist at the capacity that it exists currently. One hit for Rescue Ace doesn't feel like it's enough. The problem is, just like every other deck in the modern era, most decks don't really have a single weak spot or a few weak spots that if you hit that, the deck basically dies. So as a result, you have to hit two key cards for their deck to some capacity for the deck to actually be hit, for it to be less playable, less competitive, less powerful overall. And I think the way you solve this is by also a Turbulence limit. Now, hear me out. It sounds crazy. Seems like, what's the point? You only need one. But it seems like a Konami type hit. They've done this before, where they hit like powerful cards like Halki Fibrax to 1, where Turbulence, if you can Veiler it, especially with no emergency, if you impermit or whatever, it makes an easy target where you can't just get another one easily out. You'd have to be able to get to the quick play Monster Reborn to be able to get it out. So, or the Preventer play, right? And cards like DD Crow become a lot more effective against the deck also. Now, we know that Headquarters can recycle their Turbulence, sure. But one hit, such as just Emergency, isn't enough. So we need multiple hits. I just believe that Turbulence is possibly the one they do. If they do Airlifter, I feel like it would be too strong of a hit. You're hitting emergency and airlifter, it would be so much consistency lost. The deck would possibly fall totally out of favor. That's not the goal of this list. The goal of this list is to become less playable so that people buy the new stuff. This is Konami thinking, not my thinking. I already did my wish list. The second best deck of the format is a toss-up, but it probably, I would say, is Tearlament. It's the one that hasn't had drop-off in performance from event to event, as I said before. Unchained is right behind it, but it only really overperformed at Richmond. Tearlament has performed well at every YCS and regional this season, especially in the regionals. Tier dominates regionals, it feels like. So how do you hit Tier? Tier currently is not totally unfair, but it does some unfair things, such as, mill your opponent's deck, where in some cases that could be very powerful. It could help your opponent. The problem is, if you run certain engines in your deck in today's game, you will lose that engine, possibly, right? If you run a card that says, hey, you can only summon this guy from the deck, and that monster, one of, gets milled to the graveyard, your strategy is kind of kaput, right? You lose the ability to summon that monster. You lose that engine, right? Me as an Unchained player, I'll tell you that if they mill, and let's say your hand, you open up your gates, but they mill your Requiem King, it's kind of, it's tough sledding, because now you have one, and if you draw multiples, 2 dead cards in hand. And I think that's where the inherent unfairness of Tier stems from. Of course, the shufflers are very, very powerful. They'd be able to fusion summon from the graveyard, all this stuff. It's all very powerful, but truly the unfair thing about the deck is the Ishizu Millers. And so I think genuinely yugioh and Kelbeck have to be banned. And that sucks. I'm a proponent of possibly bringing back some of the Tier names to a higher number. I don't think Konami would do that, but I think they will hit this to have it finally stop being playable. And then in the future, possibly a year from now or whenever they finally get around to it, I think they would bring back some of the Tier names so that the deck becomes more of what it was before the Ishizu Millers were released. The next best performer of the format has been Unchained, and it's pretty undisputable. It's a top 3 deck by all measure. The problem is Unchained is inherently fair, and I'm not saying that just as an Unchained player. The majority of the players in this game will tell you that Unchained is probably the most fair top tier deck, right? It doesn't set 4 from the deck, it doesn't mill half your deck, it doesn't put up a towers, right? Those are all inherently more unfair mechanics than set up a quick link and 2 solemn warnings, essentially from 1 monster. The problem is it doesn't have access to other unfair cards because it fiend locks itself. The rank 6 pool isn't that great aside from Wave King Caesar and Beatrice, and Wave King is still fiends only. So this deck is mostly locked within its own archetype and the fiend pool in general. And that DDD High Wave King Caesar, its double solemn warning effect, it's very strong, but I don't believe it should be hit. But in this list, it's not what I want. It's what Konami would do. And if we kind of extrapolate off of what they did in the past list, they could have very well hit Kashtira by hitting Fenr to 1 and hitting Unicorn to 1 and maybe another like Birth or Theosis hit or something. Some of these consistency hits to make Kashtira basically unplayable, and which would essentially remove her Ice Heart from the format. Kind of like how OCG did it, even though OCG took a very powerful hand to the deck. I think that that's sort of what we're going to see here, because Unchained has a lot of different combo pieces that can still all do the same thing, right? The Tour Guide, right? The Sharvara play, the Aruha play, all of these plays can do the same thing. And so if you hit any of these consistency pieces, that could, yes, make Unchained worse. The problem is you'd have to hit a lot of these consistency pieces or possibly hit some of the newer cards like Sharvara or Yama. And I believe those cards aren't inherently unfair. They're actually really well designed because they further the playstyle. They're exactly what Unchained as a deck needed. It's not support like Altergeist support. Altergeist support is, here, we're taking this trap deck to make it into a combo deck, right? That's not the inherent playstyle of that deck. With Unchained, they actually got cool support that works. And so I don't think they want to hit those cards. I think they'll hit this old XYZ, that's been out in the game since Code of the Duelist. It's not ran in pretty much anything else, and it's the most powerful end board piece. From here on out, Unchained would mostly just be Summon Rage to quick link into SP Little Knight, and possibly some plays there with Nightmare Griffin. But without Wave King Caesar, you basically are a sitting duck to Nibiru, which I think if Caesar is hit, I think Unchained would fall off entirely, and sadly, I think that's the direction they're going to go. I want to say sorry to all the DDD fanboys in the audience, but let's be honest, the deck wasn't doing much anyway, and with this hit, Unchained loses their most powerful end board piece and has to rely now exclusively on Griffin Lock and Rage, and they're unbelievably susceptible to Nibiru. So it's kind of like that's the trade-off. This hit essentially guarantees that Unchained loses all competitive viability, because it would sort of be relegated to how it is in OCG, right? Max C dunks on it over there. Here, Nibiru would dunk on it, and it's pretty much over there. I'm sure some people could innovate on it, but I don't think that that you can innovate on something that is so restrictive. The next deck that has been powerful this format has been Labrynth. It had a great showing at YCS Bologna. I believe it was the third most represented deck, actually passing over Unchained, which is kind of crazy. Who would have thought, especially because Unchained has a good Labrynth matchup. But when I look at the problem cards of this deck, I don't really see any. The deck is very well designed. It's degenerate because it does the Eradicator virus and Full Force virus, Dimensional Barrier, constant looping, right? So it can basically FTK decks turn by turn, just reactivating those type of cards. But they're actual in-archetypal cards. None of them I feel are really deserving of a hit. I've heard Big Welcome Labrynth mentioned. I've heard Welcome Labrynth by yours truly. I just don't see it. I don't think it's a good hit. I think that if you take away its pieces to be able to summon monsters, I think the deck would just die. I don't think those two pieces, I think it would be too harsh of a hit to hit either of those. I think if you're going to hit the deck, my hope is that they just hit Eradicator virus, Full Force virus possibly, and D-Barrier. Will they hit those? I feel like they will not. And so it has to be hit in some capacity so that it doesn't become the best deck of the format. And I think that the hit there would just be an Ariana limit. I know it's crazy. I know I haven't seen anyone say this, but just hitting a light consistency piece, I think that would be enough to just not make the deck overly playable. After these top four, I think they'll do a few cleanup hits, a card from each archetype aside from the combo decks to keep power level overall down across the board. I think purely it has to have some hit of some sort, because then it could possibly become the best deck. I think Sleepy Memory to 1 is the way we do it here. I think Infernoble has to be addressed. I think, funny enough, I think is sold to 1. Now, I know it's a stupid hit because all you need is 1 is sold, but hear me out. It's definitely another Konami-type hit where they'll hit a monster that you only need 1 to 1, so that any of the negatives of, any of the positives of having a second, such as if they Valor your Isolde on the search effect on summon. If they Valor that, if you get a Warrior Extender, you can just summon another Isolde, make the play anyway. But if you hit it to 1, the Shotgun Valor, Shotgun Imperm on the Isolde becomes actually a pretty good play. They don't get the Warrior for next turn, the follow-up, and the Isolde is finished, right? They can't play through that. So I think that hit would help make the deck somewhat weaker. And another hit, just to further ensure that this deck doesn't see basically tier 0 viability, would be Divine Sword Phoenix Blade. Now, I wasn't thinking about this card until one of my buddies turned me on to it. Shout out to Bane. The card is incredibly key to the strategy. It helps you recur resources. It is one of the best equips in the Noble Knight deck. Even if it is just the actual equip effect is nothing, but that banish 2 to bring it back to hand is very key in the deck. And I think banishing the Phoenix Blade with an Isolde limit, I think that would keep Infernoble at a spot where the power level is controlled. The whole goal of this list is buy the new stuff, don't let any old stuff become tier 0. That's Konami's mindset 100%. The next deck that should be hit is Vanadium. Vanadium would be way too powerful after these hits because Rescue Ace, Unchained, Labrynth, Infernoble, Tearlaments, all of these decks being basically removed from the format or at least power crept down. I think that Vanadium would be too powerful. Unfortunately, I did not upload a Vanadium card here, but I meant to. I meant to upload Lightheart. So I'll put it here in the edits. Lightheart, definitely a limit. I think maybe a ban, but I feel like a ban would just kill the deck. Lightheart limit would suffice in, for now, making the deck less playable just so that it doesn't become the next best deck in the game. So the next deck that I think they'll address is the Runic deck in some capacity. As we've seen in regionals all across the country and now in the YCS, Runic is still a top tier deck, right? And what tier is that? Is that 1.5? Is that 2? I don't know. But the deck is very powerful. It's a really good engine. A lot of decks can abuse it. I've seen Chimera Runic has been running around the regional scene. And I think with the performance of Josh Smith, I think they do hit the deck in some capacity. Not to make it fully unplayable, but just to make it fall just a little. Because if all of these other decks are hit, then Runic and even Bestials, that Runic Bestial variant, could be the next best deck. So this deck needs to be addressed in some capacity. I think a Fountain hit to 1, which is what people clamored for originally, to hit Fountain to 1, and the deck basically becomes not unplayable, but it's a lot more susceptible to things. I think it would fall out of favor. And so therefore I think the Fountain hit there is enough. I think the next card that they would hit would be Bestial Drworm. I think he's incredibly powerful. The Bestials have proven themselves as too powerful of cards to exist at multiples, especially the Magnamut and the Drworm. So I think Drworm will be hit, especially with how well Bestials performed at YCS Bologna. They're in many side decks. They were in the champions deck list. They were basically carrying that deck. So they will have to be addressed. I think Konami now finally has them on the radar again. I think Lubellion possibly warrants being addressed because he's such an enabler for that deck. But inherently, it's more than, like, in my opinion, it's the most fair Bestial because it doesn't DD Crow you. It just searches you a card and then can summon itself. I know that it gets to Branded Regained, which is probably the best card in that whole deck. But I think Lubellion for now is fair. I think the DD Crow-like effects are much more important to hit than it is the Lubellion itself. I think after this, I think they address Fenr, right? Fenr is incredibly strong. Every deck in the format runs them. At least it feels like it. It searches itself. It can banish opponents' cards if they do anything. If they breathe, banish them face down, right? It's unbelievably oppressive. And as far as it's concerned, if your deck is nothing without Fenrir, then your deck is nothing regardless, right? You shouldn't have him anyway. After Fenrir, I think as far as Branded is concerned, I think they hit Gimmick Puppet. Limit Gimmick Puppet, hell yeah. No. Forbidden, right? I think it's the only thing unfair left that Branded does. Yes, if Branded Fusion resolves, it's really nice. It's very powerful. But at the end of the day, if Branded Fusion resolves and you let them combo off entirely, their end boards aren't very strong. If you just look at Branded Fusion itself. Now, if you combine it with other cards, sure, their end boards are more impressive with, Mirror Jade, Branded in Red, all sorts of other stuff, Quem. But truly, the one unfair thing that I think Branded does, and the reason it can steal cheap wins, I would argue it's the dimensional shifter of Branded, and that's the Gimmick Puppet. It basically raises their win rate 5 to 10 percentage points, where if Gimmick Puppet didn't exist, Branded would certainly be under 50% win rate, and I think it would fall out of the meta entirely. The only possibilities of Branded being used in today's format would be as some sort of engine, where that could warrant a hit. I just don't like seeing other decks hit for the sins of something else, right? Branded shouldn't be hit because Chimera can abuse it. Chimera should be addressed, correct? As I stop my rambling finally, I think one final hit as a general hit across the entire format is Prosperity to 1, right? It's a very powerful card that allows inconsistent decks to see great success, and it lets players see non-engine and side cards. I mean, what else could you possibly want? Now, could this be Konami's way? This card, could that be Konami's way of balancing the game, giving you a card to see board breakers or combo going second? It could be. But if it is, why is it so overtuned for going first? It lets you see hand traps, floodgates, combo. And the damage drawback inherently hurts the going second player, right? So pot is still, even if it is a good going second card, it's a better going first card. So it should be limited in some capacity. When a card is possibly better than Pot of Greed, it should not exist. Now, one other card that a lot of people have clamored for to be hit, that I think they should hit, but they won't, is the Red Dragon Archfiend Calamity. I think that Konami wants to sell Valiant Smashers, and giving Centurion an unfair free win condition, as lame as it is, helps do that. The set is still selling. The Centurion cards are still very pricey. They're the only things carrying that set. I do not think that Calamity gets hit. I think it should be. I think Centurion actually has some more interesting plays once you take that away, where they just don't have to do the helmet play. They can actually set up some nice boards, make the level 12 Super Heavy Samurai, Card of Demise, draw 3 cards basically. They can do summoning Quasar, summoning the Red Dragon Archfiend that can banish all your cards. Like, these are great effects, and they're just being used as Calamity Turbo, which is kind of really reminiscent of the true king of all calamities, except this calamity is a little bit worse. But overall, I don't think they hit it. It's just that's how Konami works. It's all about that cash money, baby. So what do you guys think of the list so far? Anything you think Konami will hit 100%, or anything that I put here that has no chance of happening, such as the Divine Sword Phoenix Blade or the Gimmick Puppet? I'd love to hear from you in the comments, so comment down below. Now, let's get to the most fun part of the ban list. What will they bring back? This is a lot more subjective. I think it's you can kind of anticipate it, but a lot of times they've proven us, completely out of left field. They'll bring back some random stuff that no one was predicting. So here it'll be kind of quick. I think Magispector Kieran. I think he comes back to 1 because the Magispector support has been announced. Pendulum is really not doing anything, so throwing them a bone isn't a big deal. I think that Kieran is fine. It's been, I don't know how many years since it's been on the ban list, like half a decade or more. I think it's fine. I think we're big boys now. I think we're ready for Kieran to be back. I think the first unlimit would be Engage, right? Sky Striker has done nothing. New support's coming down the pipe. I think Engage is well warranted to get released off the ban list fully. And then the deck can be finally at full power. The next card I think that they will limit, even though it can probably be unlimited, will be Redux. Right, I know I've heard a lot of people say that Tidal is still powerful because it's a Foolish Burial effect. Well, Foolish Burial exists and it's not overpowered. Redux is a Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn exists. It's not ran, so I think Redux is well warranted to come back, especially because the Earth attribute really is nothing too powerful. And I think all the Dragon Rulers can really just be back at 3. But I think Konami goes a little slower than that, right? They take their time. Another card that should be unlimited, right? Let's trade Fenrir for Pankratops. A lot of people have clamored for this. This is a great call. Pankratops to 3 helps out boards. It's inherently just a great going second card. Going first, it does nothing. Why is this even at 1? Like, I don't understand, right? Really stupid. This card should have never been hit, ever. Because the game actually was cool when he was around, right? When he was available at 3, you knew, you're like, hey, I'm taking away two negates off the board, and then I can play through their stuff and set up my stuff, and then we can have a back and forth, right? With this card being limited, it's like they said, no, we want FTKs to exist, right? Ridiculous. And finally, last, but certainly not least, the last card I think they might bring back is Masterpiece to 1. A lot of people have said no, right? It's a towers, all this different stuff. This is sort of a Hail Mary myself. I think, will they bring him back? I'm leaning 70% chance no, 30% chance yes. I think it's a 50-50 in the next year. So by the end of 2024, I believe they will bring him back. But let's just discuss it real quick. The card is inherently balanced for a powerful card. If we compare it to Noir, Masterpiece looks like Towers originally, when we compared Masterpiece to Towers, right? When Masterpiece was new and Towers was back, I mean, towers looked like ass. So it was good, but certainly power creeped, you know? Masterpiece can be immune to two things, where Noir can be immune to all activated effects. And yes, there's some cheeky ways to get around that activated effects clause, but it's still effectively the same thing as modern age towers. Masterpiece only being able to be immune to two things, ideally to monsters and traps, so you can be boosted and have battle protection from diagram, means that any board breaker, Lightning Storm, Raigeki, Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, pretty much anything in your side deck, just outs him, right? He's done. Any spell that has multiple utility to use for other decks, right? You'd run Lightning Storm, Raigeki, all these other things. Well, maybe not Raigeki, but you know what I mean. These type of cards you run for other decks, Masterpiece is toast. Now, if they make him spell and monster immune, then he doesn't have battle protection from the field spell. He doesn't have the boost, and he dies to Imperm or a 3000 monster. Like, yes, he has one pop. Noir spins like 10 cards. So, bring back Masterpiece, Konami. Do it!
Do it! Just do it!
Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment down below, like the video, and subscribe to my channel because it really does help, and I'm able to get this content out to more people. So, thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.